Yeah,
little
it's
bit.
pretty good. Got a few things in the back.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nun. Just Stu here again tonight. Nun is busy running his business down in Cabo, but we are here at episode 368, and I want to welcome a new friend I've made recently. We've had a few people from my trip to the inauguration in D.C., and Peter was one of those I was lucky enough to, by happenstance, just happen to run into down there. And Peter, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No, it's great to be here and great to be on your show.
Yeah, awesome. Now you were the you were the Secretary of the VA under President Trump's first term. Is that correct?
I was the acting secretary for a period of time in 2018 in the transition between the first secretary he had picked and the second secretary that he picked. So,
Okay. And now have you've been active in politics most of your life? Have you been
no, fortunately, no. That was a later in life entrapment that came. Basically, in about 2011, I'd been out of the service for a while, and I was working in the private sector, and worked for a guy who wanted to get involved in politics. And I was like, yeah, I got a poli sci degree once upon a time. Why not see what that's really like? So ran his political organization in a few early primary states during that presidential cycle. And as I tell folks, go into politics carefully, because once you're in, you it's hard to get out. So I have been around it ever since.
well, a lot of people get poli sci degrees. Not too many actual people actually get to use it towards something.
And I won't say that I have either. Maybe a few of the books that I read have been useful. Probably The Prince by Machiavelli was probably the one that has been the most appropriate. But other than that, my son actually suggested that he wanted to get a poli sci degree, and I said, "Oh, that's fine if you want to pay for your own school, because I'm sure not going to contribute to that."
So do you put it right there
So.
with theater and liberal arts like basket weaving?
Hey, it's at some schools, like maybe Hillsdale and Free College out of Florida, poli sci degrees are probably worth something, but in most places it is, especially now. And I went through school in the '90s, and it was kind of indoctrination back then too. So I can only imagine what the typical state school it's like now. So hopefully that'll change. But for now,
Yeah.
go get something you can do something with, an engineering degree or something, or just go enlisted like I did first, and just don't make the mistake of going to school after it. So
There you go. So let's talk about let's talk about some of your military service and background.
sure.
Uh, let our viewers and listeners know a little bit about like what you joined, what you did, and how was that experience? I think you were in a couple different you were in a couple different branches.
I was, yeah. So started in that one, working on F-14s, probably the best job I ever had. Enlisted right out of high school, became a structures mechanic and then a hydraulics mechanic on the F-14. Did a couple West Packs on the Abraham Lincoln, and then got out to go to school. So yeah, it was the best 4 years of my life.
Awesome. Okay. Were you mechanically like inclined and kind of what you did in your younger
Hey,
years?
the Navy taught me everything I needed to know, which was probably good. It's sort of like shooting, right? You love to get somebody who's never shot before. You can teach them all the good habits and none of the bad. Learning how to flatten rivets the right way and cut aluminum and join stuff was definitely what the Navy taught me. Still keep it today. Loved working on cars and stuff like that. So it was definitely something that provided me. But really since then it's just been an admiration of aviation. I've gotten a chance to work in that industry a couple of the times since then, and still just love it. So it was definitely a great start. And when I went in, the first Top Gun movie had just come out, and so it was cool to be at NAS Miramar in San Diego, and so definitely got to ride the wave of that. And then as an older guy, you get to see that all come back. So that and especially over the last few hours, the memes on F-14s have been pretty epic. So I've been really enjoying that.
So did you get
I
some
mean,
good?
sad that we bombed them or somebody bombed
Yeah.
them, but happy to see that they were still on their wheels and at least ready for something.
That had to be a little weird seeing that, black and white FLIR footage and just watching the thing just get ripped apart. That'd
That
be a lot.
there was a lot of sort of like the scene in Star Wars. There was a lot of cries around the country when the last sort of operational F-14s were put to bed. So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah. And I think that was at our one of I mean it's our last swing wing plane we had, right? We only had a couple.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
F-111,
yeah.
F-14 on the Navy side, and yeah, I don't think the Air Force really, other than the F-111s that they flew once upon a time, that was about it. So yeah, that variable wing technology still is still works, but now with what we've got in the inventory, it's a still sexy, but not usable as much anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, but then went to school after that. Went to the Air Force. Not really for any other reason other than the fact that they offered me a better deal than the Navy did, which is typical, as folks know from recruitment. So went in there, got a commission, and then went into logistics and supply chain stuff. And again, interesting times to be in. First kind of deployment was with Bosnia, and then was in England in 9/11. So pretty much deployed about a month after that happened, and then came back to States. They decided to send me to grad school, and then they decided they had too many of us and let me go. So yeah, it was really kind of an interesting ride, from the military perspective. But I've
Yeah.
loved being in it. I loved having gotten the chance to do it, and then stay very close to it since then. Whether it's contracting or just being around the services. I live about 10 miles away from the Pentagon, so it's always close.
Yeah, yeah. So in the air, so it's kind of interesting you got into the Air Force because what I understood, at least back in my day, was the Air Force was not big on taking a lot of prior service people from other branches. Like you had to have a very special job. Maybe it was just when the Army,
Yeah.
they were not hip on taking Army guys except for a very couple things. Um,
My career's been weird because I won't say weird. It's been interesting from a timing perspective because I have entered and exited two different services on the low point when they needed people, and then the high point when they thought they had too many people. Both times, I left. I enlisted in '89. People were they were just taking everybody they could take. Got out in '94, '95 when they were saying, "Oh, we got too many people. We got to get folks out," and they were offering early outs. Commissioned in '98. And then got out in 2005 into 2005 2006 when the Air Force had said, "Oh, we have too many officers, so we need to can you please leave?" And whenever somebody offers you a grad degree and then a 3-year active duty service exemption, you take it. So they
pretty
said they didn't need me, so I was like, okay, I'll be here if you need me, but otherwise I'm going to go do some other stuff. So,
thanks for the
but
grad school.
it was rewarding.
Yeah, thanks for the grad school. Appreciate that. Yeah. Uh,
Well, at the
it's
time, I heard rumors that they were letting seniors at the academy graduate, and then you're done. You're
no
you're
com-
welcome. No
no
no active duty service commitment. You could just go. Now that was a rumor. I don't know if that was true, but they were pretty desperate to get people out at the time, and but it's no different. The services do that seems
yeah,
like every decade.
They go up and down. Yeah, I gotta say it. They probably had too many or didn't know what to do with them, because I know in '06 I was surprised at the number of Air Force people that were attached to us in Afghanistan, doing all
Yeah.
kind of support positions and Navy, and be like, oh, aren't you a long way away from the water? It's
Well, I mean, if I mean, I remember those days. I was at the Air Force Materiel Command headquarters, and you'd see some of these requirements come in, and from an Air Force perspective, it's like, oh man, what's going on? You'd hear the discussions about the Army and the ops tempo and the tasking, and I knew some folks in the special operations world, so I knew some of that, what that looked like, but there, it's kind of expected. But then since then, I've had a chance to talk to some folks about what those years really were like and some of the stretching that we were doing. Honestly, I wonder how sometimes we actually made it through there. It was definitely much worse than I think folks really knew. The deployments, and I saw that at the VA after the fact. You start talking to veterans that you just start listening to their stories about their deployment cycles and what they were going through and that kind of stuff. I mean, the combat was the combat. We know what that is, and we accept that. But just everything else that it took to stick it, to stay through and survive those years from 2003, 2004, all the way through the teens. So it definitely gave me a different perspective from the from the VA side, looking back at what pretty much everybody that served during this period of time has really gone through, whether
yeah.
they were in combat or not. Yeah.
Right, right. So let's talk about it. So you had this unique opportunity. You were selected as the interim VA secretary for a little while, during President Trump's first term, when he first coming on. How Just curious. I mean, how were you on the inside track? Did you know? Did
How'd that happen, right?
you? Yeah, I mean, how did they like? Hey,
Yeah.
your call.
I mean,
Trump.
it's funny, right? Because now I've got some great friends that have been involved in like the VA for decades, back to the Bush years, President Bush years, and that stuff. But no, so I don't tell this story often, but I having had some experience in politics, right? The first time I had met now President Trump, at the time it was just Donald Trump, was in 2010, down in West Palm Beach. He spoke at a rally down there, and there was rumors about whether he was or wasn't going to run. And part of the work I was doing at the time was identifying candidates and talking about specific issues around the debt and deficit issues. And um, so I met him, and it was really interesting. And as anybody else would probably meet him at that time, but I didn't really know him that well. And then subsequently after that, I was doing a kind of a convention meeting kind of thing with political folks in South Carolina, and we invited him to come speak in January of 2015 at our little conference, and it was Myrtle Beach, South Carolina group, just wonderful group of folks, just dedicated grassroots folks, and he came. And so this was January of 2015. So this was before, the Golden Staircase, all this kind of stuff. And got to meet him again, and by that point I had done this little meeting with this pretty the same group of people for a few years, so I knew how they responded to folks. We had every political candidate you could imagine that had spoken to these folks, so you kind of see how they respond to them. And when Trump came and spoke to them, all I could say, it was different. Like, it was a different reaction. It was a different, the way they listened was different. And so I remember coming back to DC because I was living here at the time. And I remember telling some folks that this is just different. Now, I wasn't working in politics, but you live around here, you get to know folks. I was working at some large consulting firms and doing work with DoD and things. And I just said, look, I mean, I don't know if the guy's going to run, but if he does, it's going to make a difference. There's going to be an impact because he's different, and the way people react to him is differently. Now it's commonplace, right? I mean, now I think people understand that, even people that are resistant understand that at this point. But at that time, it was still new. And um, he then announced, and I was pretty confident in the spring of 2016 that he's going to probably win the primary. And if he wins, this is really going to be interesting. But for me personally, it was, well, if I want to be on board this train, there's really only two. Well, in my mind at the time, there's only two ways to kind of join a new administration. simplistically that of what I knew at the time was you either, write big checks or you work on their campaign. And so in the summer of 2016, I quit my job, and I had a friend that was working on his campaign. I said, "Hey, is there, well, by that point he was the nominee." And I was like, "Hey, is there something I can do?" So I did. I ended up doing advance, setting up events and doing stuff like that for him and for Vice President Pence. And said, "Okay, well, I've done my part." And so then he wins, and we're all excited. And I got to go up to New York and got to see the whole thing, and it was all great. I wasn't on the transition team, so I kind of just hung around. I was waiting for a phone call, and people had asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm a DoD guy, or maybe VA, something around the military, and didn't hear from anybody. So Christmas goes by, and now I'm getting a little worried. So I'm like, well, it was a good try, but I guess I got to go back and get a job. So I'm throwing my resume out there, trying to get a job the worst time of year, and what I now realize is probably the worst time to try to get a job, which is during transitions, if you're not going in. And about 3 weeks before the inauguration, I got an email from our senior White House advisor at the VA, and a great guy named Jake Leinenkugel, and it was just a simple email. It said, "Hey, you're on the VA beachhead team. Welcome aboard. And sorry, you're kind of the last guy picked because we only have like this one position. It's kind of lower level, and you're probably not, you're probably up, above that, but would you take it?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I need a job." So it began. I won't say by chance. I mean, I'm sure I was on some list, and it was just a matter of time for those things to get sorted out. But it kind of felt like the last minute again. And so I showed up at the VA on inauguration day, swore in, and began the process of trying to find a job inside the department. It was, as you can imagine, very. I think most people, especially on the government side, were just purely in shock at the time. Um, I mean, I even ran across later on in my work at the VA. Most agencies had already planned things for President Clinton. I mean, I like
Right.
presentations, and people had already picked what jobs they were going to have, and follow this stuff. So that was a little humorous, but anyway, so just kind of kept my head down, did my job, tried to learn as much as I could about what was going on. I knew a little bit. I'd done some projects at the Veterans Benefits Administration beforehand, so I kind of knew some stuff, but. It's good to be in the right place when the right time comes around. And there's an executive order to set up a accountability office because the president had
Right.
campaigned on getting bad employees out of the VA. So had made friends with a guy that was there that was kind of liaisoning with the White House, and he gave me the executive order, and he said, "Hey, come up with an operational plan about how we would do this." And I'm like, "Okay." So came up with a white paper on how to create basically what became the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection, and the White House liked it, and so they said, "Okay, go set it up." And I got to learn firsthand, which we would need about 6 hours to talk about, how to set something up new in a federal department when no one there wants it to be set up.
I was about to
And
say, in your
yeah,
face.
it was. Oh my goodness, it was. I mean, you make some mistakes. You do some right things. You make some mistakes along the way. I definitely do it differently than I did it before, but it definitely resulted in a lot of change.
Would
Some
you
people
say
lost their jobs. Yeah.
would you say there was a swamp in the VA?
Oh, I mean, yeah. So I don't want to be critique. I
Well,
mean,
bureauc
there's no department in the federal government that more exemplifies kind of what we talk about when we talk about accountability and how you can change government based on voting and things like that. And I try to explain folks, and there's a reason too. And I think most veterans, when they really think through this, and especially when their interactions with the VA, they'll start to probably understand this because um, I actually spent some time to research going back, because in '89 is when President Reagan elevated the VA to a cabinet level position. Before that, it was, the three administrations. We had the Health Administration, Benefits Administration. They operated independently. They had commissioners, all this kind of stuff. Um, so I went back and read the congressional testimony that was going on when they were coming up with the authorizing language for a Department of Veterans Affairs. And I mean, I don't know if I looked at it through a political lens, but I just sort of maybe had a bias that it was like, well, Democrats were probably against it, or Republicans for it, and I was absolutely wrong. Senator Glenn was the head of, I think, government reform or government operations at the time, and he was kind of leading the conversation, as you'd expect from somebody like him, about setting this up. And he was actually very much kind of against the idea. He thought that it was going to make it too, political, and it was going to become a, just an issue. Keep it where it needs to be. But then when you go back further and you read like what General Bradley wrote about the VA, I mean, he even said, look, the VA needs to be a temporary institution. We're going to help these guys out. We're going to reacclimate them, reintegrate them. And, he thought about 5 years, and then you're out of the VA system and you're back in the US's social safety net of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all those things. Because, we had all that back in the 50s. And so he always saw the VA as a temporary thing. I think Senator Glenn had some of the same ideas, but by that point it had been around for a while, so they didn't really think they were going to get rid of the VA. But they didn't want it to be political, so they created a VA that is almost immune to political influence, which you'd think would be a great thing, right? I mean, that would
Right.
be, oh, cool. We don't want politics playing in this, except for, well, what can you and I do about, as voters, as citizens? What we can do about changing the VA? Well, we can't vote for anybody to change it because the people we vote for can't seem to change it, whether it's the executive side or the legislative side. And so you kind of get into this sticking point where, well, if we expect, a President Obama who tried to change some things about the VA, or a President Trump, or President Bush, or any of these folks to, hey, we elected you, go make the VA work better. They're kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do? I mean, I can't fire anybody. I can't, I can barely hire the people I want to hire in there. There's only, there's a you think about the number of political appointees that you can put in the VA, it hovers somewhere between 35 and 40 for an organization that pushes 500,000 employees. You can't really, implement your agenda in somewhere like that. And I mean that either way, right? I mean, if I'm President Biden, I can't put enough people in there to make a change either. So, but again, I mean, is that the fault of it not being, not the political side, or is there some other kind of institutional, or the way we've set this up that's wrong? And so, I fortunately got to spend a lot of time thinking about it, and I have since then. I mean, once you've worked there, once you've gotten the chance to do little incremental pieces of helping the VA get better, and most of the time they're never really noticed. Not because your effort wasn't good. It just the institution's so big that it's hard to. Sorry, my light went out. It's hard to change it, but
Well,
I think we've got we got choices to make at VA soon.
right. I mean, you think about it: VA, CDC, NIH, organizations that prior to 2020, not VA, but the other ones specifically, but all those are ones that but definitely prior to 2020, you would never think would be biased, would have political leaning, right? Would be they would be, when the CDC put something out, or NIH, or FDA or whatever, you'd be like, okay, this is based on science, this is legit, doesn't matter who's in office, right? You would think it wouldn't we lean one way or the other, but the problem is when you have no accountability, right?
Yep.
And all I got to do is wait you out, right? All I have to do is so that's one of my questions. Obviously, well after your time there, but the impact of Doge, right? That obviously has
Mhm.
been out for the last 6 months, and is really, as far as I can consider, the first time ever in our country's history where we really tried to rein something in and hold people accountable, regardless of how people feel it was done, or the method, or who did it, right, and all that kind of mess. But just kind of curious from what I know it's kind of outside looking in, but you have a lot of insight most
Mhm.
Americans don't. What do you think
Yeah.
in on the VA, and has it been good or negative?
So I think probably, and this is, again, I will preface this. This is my own opinion. This is from my own observations of what's going on. But frankly, at VA, I mean, Doge has been a scratch. I mean, it's not really gotten to the meat of much there just yet. I mean, the impact, and for a couple of reasons too. I mean, and I think depending on the agency, Doge's impact has varied based on what it can do, right? And you're talking about some folks that are very good at putting data together and finding things. So places like Treasury, wow, you can make some big differences. Some of the other agencies, when you're just filtering through hundreds and thousands of grants and that kind of stuff, and you start seeing where payments are, great stuff. I mean, at VA, I mean, you're trying to find where services are disconnected from spend. Like we're spending taxpayer dollars and it should be going, every dollar should be going to a veteran service. Like how do you crack that through? Because the VA is very good at, I mean, well, I won't say they're very good, like there's some ominous thing, but you're talking about, well, I'm going to spend money on healthcare. Well, who's going to argue with where that money's being spent and should it be spent this or there or whatever else, or is this contract the right one? That's
Right.
not something that you can just bring smart folks in that look at contract language and go, okay, well, we need to cut this contract because you got to have folks that are much more knowledgeable about what's there. So that's why I say it's not been negligible impact, but it's just not been the same kind of uh, dramatic. Oh, we're cutting billions of dollars of stuff. I have heard of many contracts that have been cut, and frankly, I'm kind of supportive of a lot of it because there was a lot of professional services contracts at the VA for staff support and things like that. Those are kind of easy to say that's not supporting veteran healthcare or claims processing or those kind of things. That's you know. Uh, there was one that if I had went back in, I would have cut on, within the first hour, and it was tens of millions of dollars for innovation, and it was specifically tell us how we should innovate. And I'm like, well, and I'm kind of, I guess, hard on this. Like, if I need to hire somebody to tell you how to innovate, I need to hire somebody differently for the job that you're in because
Right.
that's what you should be doing. Like, if you can't contribute that, why am I hiring somebody else to tell you how to be innovative?
Yeah. So
If you're
now,
in a job that requires you to be innovative, then you can't be, well, then that's a bad hire on my part, and I need to find somebody that can do that better. So we had some of that, but once you cut those, they're done. And then, you kind of have to go to the bigger issues of VA is, how do we improve access? How do we make sure that we're providing veterans what they need and we're not just a sieve of cracks and crevices that veterans just fall through um, every day.
right. Right.
And unfortunately, that's more of what I deal with now is folks that fall through the cracks, and I try to find ways to get them plugged back in. But
Yeah.
I like that job.
The accountability office obviously was the first thing that got a lot of praise from the veteran community that President Trump was even trying to do that because I
Mhm.
mean anyone that has been myself one of them that's been part of the VA and has received benefits and has gotten health care and that kind of stuff. I mean, we've all seen it. We all know the terrible stories of people dying while waiting on service or getting bad treatments or diagnosis.
Mhm.
Personally, people close to me that things got dragged out and the cancer eventually got them, even though the VA knew they had it. Or worse yet, people took their own lives because they got so frustrated, right? Which is this the worst thing of all. Um,
Yeah.
so the accountability office got a lot of praise. It's awesome that you're a part of that. Do you see? Do you have you seen or heard is Doug Collins bringing something like that back? Is President Trump trying to
Oh,
implement
yeah,
that?
so the good thing about the accountability office was the presidential executive order that came out in May of 2017 was the precursor to the legislation that came out soon after that. So about 3 months later, we had authorizing language in statute, set up the office. Here's how we're going to do it. That kind of stuff. Um, I mean, I appreciate that the veteran community thought it was very positive at the time because it immediately got attacked as soon as we went into operations by Democrats on the Hill, and I have to say Democrats because they led the charge against it. I mean, because what we ended up doing was we ended up showing because we actually had two missions part of this. One was the whistleblower protection piece, which I didn't realize how much of a, and this isn't whistleblowers, the industry around this of just how problematic that is. And we've seen that play out in other agencies and things like that afterwards. I mean, we took the approach because if somebody came to me with a whistleblower disclosure that was criminal in nature, I didn't have 1811s. I didn't have like law enforcement investigative authorities Right. So I had to basically just send that to the IG. And so, we got lots of different disclosure, people doing really bad stuff. So I would just, pass it to the IG and send it to them. But what we thought we could really make an impact on was all the and whistleblower. I hate the connotation of it because everybody has some mysterious kind of thing.
Mm.
But it's like, hey, I've got to, there's a better way we should be doing operations, or there's something that's working that's not, not working well. Who do I tell? And sometimes you've got a good manager that you can talk to, and unfortunately, a lot of times you don't, especially in our system. So we wanted to be that kind of clearinghouse for everything from a good idea to, hey, I don't want anybody to know it's me saying it, but this is not right, and it's not, and it falls below that criminal level. And then we could go figure it out and make it work, because most of the time those whistleblowers just want to see things work better.
Right.
They're not trying to, get in the paper. They don't want to go testify in Congress. They're just like, let's just fix this. And that's all really we were authorized in many ways to do anyway. So we tried to set that up. We had, you got to remember, this was 2017. All the whistleblowers from the Phoenix scandal, from all these other things, were still testifying in Congress, those kind of things. So we had
Right.
a big credibility gap to get over, both internally and for the administration, to get those folks to just say, look, we are trying. The president's trying. He's directed us to do stuff. Work with us to make this better. So really, I think probably how I scared some people, probably in the IG and maybe on the Hill, was one of the first folks I hired was one of the prominent whistleblowers in the Phoenix scandal.
Oh,
And I got connected to him through one of the other folks on the political team who knew him and had worked at the Concerned Veterans for America, and they had worked with him on his case. And so I got to meet him, and I was like, and he came in, as you can imagine. I mean, he had been under attack and had been discriminated against and treated like crap for a lot of things, but he'd hung in there. He was a Marine, so he was just pushing through it. It took an effect, but he was pushing through it. And so I was like, he came, made a presentation to tell me how bad everything was, and he wanted to help, and so and he really expected me just to like listen to him and be like, okay, thank you, and send him on his way. So at the end of his presentation, I was like, well, you want to come work for me? And it's what he really wanted to do. He just didn't. I don't think he thought that he'd get that opportunity. And so we brought him in, and he was basically the guy to tell me how whistleblowers think. I was like, well, I need to know that. I mean, I've not been a whistleblower myself. I've not been treated like that in this sort of situation. So I can empathize with these folks,
right.
but I can't really understand what they're going through. So I need some interpretation of that. Um, and then he introduced me to the reporter that had basically busted that case open in
Right.
Phoenix. And so he introduced me to her. And so I offered her a job too. I think when I hired her, they really got worried because now I had an investigative reporter working on the inside of the VA. I hired her because she asked good questions. So I figured, well, we're supposed to be investigating things, so why not have somebody that knows how to really form good questions and has got already has some understanding of these issues. So
And knows
anyway, so
and all that kind of
that's,
stuff.
oh
Knows how to.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a fun kind of initial setup. We had some roadblocks. I mean, just right in the face. That we did some outreach to the unions. Went to some of their training sessions to tell them, what the office was going to do, and because they all thought we were just going to come fire a bunch of union folks. I'm like, look, I'm not trying to fire anybody. I'm trying to find bad people doing bad things, and we'll fire them because we have these new authorities. But the institution then took it as an opportunity to go fire people as well, and there was just a lot to work through. Leadership at the VA wasn't what it should be at the time, so we were kind of off on our own a little bit, which that first year in the Trump administration was really interesting, but I learned a lot. And we were successful to get the office set up. And so then when the chief of staff was retired or let go, however you want to look at it. Then I got the phone call from the White House to be. It literally was funny because a friend of mine who was working in the White House called and said, "You're going to get a phone call in 15 minutes to ask you if you want to be the chief of staff. What are you going to say?" And I'm like, "Well, of course I'm going to say yes." 10 minutes later, I got a phone call and said, "Hey, going to be chief of staff." So I had to pack up my box of stuff and walk across the street and go get in the chief of staff's office. It was empty at the time. And then, a couple months after that, the president fired the secretary and brought in Mr. Wilkie from DOD, and he was the acting for a little while. And then they nominated him. And then they said, "Okay, we want you to be the acting until he gets confirmed." I said, "Okay." Little odd, because we did have a deputy secretary at the time, but the White House really didn't like him either. So I got the uncomfortable situation of of having to try to respectfully ease people into making decisions that they need to make for their careers. So, but it was a great experience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've seen all different parts of it, and it's interesting, like say, being involved with the accountability office and all that, VA Mission Act and everything. It's that's always been the big complaint about the VA is holding people accountable. Do you feel it's gotten better? Having worked inside a DO after I retired, having to work as a inside of the Army Material Command and that part of
Mhm.
Department of the Army. I mean, I've definitely seen people too that I would just walk out of their office and I'd be like, wow, they're just stealing oxygen from the rest of us. Like, when I saw Doge cuts and I saw that, I'm like, there's so much that American people don't even know that it's just,
Oh yeah.
yeah, there may be some innocent, Dick, there may be some, casualties of war that shouldn't be let go. And I've had some of my friends that have had that happen, but,
Mhm.
tractors, but I'm like, there's so much waste that they could get rid of. Do you feel the accountability office and, is now doing what it should be and has solidified itself to be able to have some authority to do those things?
No, I mean as is most things, I won't say it got politicized, but in the Biden administration, it kind of just fell away from what it was supposed to do. They're really,
Get neutered?
you
It
know,
just got neutered authority?
I you know I struggle on that piece because I always think it's the intent of, it's commander's intent when you get to those kind of things. If you put somebody there that intends to follow the law and do it, and you support them, the statute is there. Um, we got resistance from the IG and from the Senate, but we still did our job and we just pushed through it. And maybe naively, I kind of think that sometimes, but I was like, I'll do the right thing. And then, if somebody wants to tell me I'm not, then we can have that conversation, and we'll just see how that plays out. But, the intent that I think the president had was to get rid of bad people. Now we have a different, what ended up happening was, we hired another 100,000 people at VA basically over the last 4 years. And so
Right.
now it's not as much good people, bad people, kind of thing. It's what's the right way to run the VA.
Yeah.
And we started having that conversation with the Mission Act in 2018. We started to lay the groundwork for, we need to have a serious conversation about what the VA needs to do, because just like Secretary Collins says now, we've been doing the same things for a while and it ain't working. Like the suicide rate hasn't gone down, the homeless rate has gotten worse. Access, I mean, we're still seeing 3 to 6 patients a day on average at the VA. I mean, the utilization's nowhere near it needs to be. Community care enroll or in eligibility is not done correctly. I mean, none of these things are being done well. So, what problem do we really have at this point? I don't know if focusing on. I mean, you're always going to have bad people, and you're going to need to take care of them. To me, that's almost secondary to really aligning the VA to be what it needs to be. But I think
Focus
you have to start by saying, what does it need to be? Like that we finally need to decide that.
focus on core principles or what it was originally built for. I mean, that's what it sounds like is get back to the basics I mean, it's a
Yeah.
cliche it's thrown out there a lot, but I mean, you're there to, like you say, provide service and benefits to veterans. Everything else just put off to the side for a second and does it directly or indirectly accomplish that mission,
Well,
Um,
and in that sense, that this team that's there right now has been doing a good job at that. We've set aside a lot of the distracting, not veteran care related issues. We just pushed it off to the side. Gotten a little resistance, but it's been helpful to have at least a majority on your side. We'll see what happens after the midterms for them, and how uncomfortable it gets. I was I was the acting secretary for 3 months, and I testified in front of Congress at least 3 times. which was a little unusual, but at the time it was, they wanted to beat up on somebody, and I got to be the guy to do it, which I actually appreciated, because there's nothing. It's scary, but it's nothing cooler than going up there and having to go up there and sit for testimony and stuff like that. So it's kind of fun. Never would have expected to ever get to do stuff like that.
You're
But
like F-14 mechanic, get up here to do this. And,
yeah, no kidding, right? How did you get there? Well, I'll tell you, just to brag. I mean, one of the things that folks don't always realize. So when you see Air Force One flying around, right? um, the way that those flights are funded in most cases, not like the White House has a budget, right? It's more like what we'd see on the DoD side, where the organizations that are using that, maybe it's a cargo flight or whatever else, they typically fund those things. And so, the way the president flies to events in the U.S. or whatever will be funded by an agency that event is for. And so we flew him to, I think, a VFW event in Kansas City. And so I got, so you're paying for the flight. It comes out of your budget. So they say, okay, well, you can have a couple of people come on the plane with it. That's your payoff. So you get to go. So I got to go. But the fun part is it was in July, and my birthday happens to be in July, and it happened to be on my birthday. So I got to fly in Air Force One on my birthday. So I was like, you know what? There's really nothing else I can do. I'm done. If I could just retire, I just retire, because it's about the coolest thing I could do. I've done some cool stuff, especially on the military side, but nothing like that one. So I'm I'm,
short of
I'm
having
pretty
the
happy
president
about that.
sing, short of having him sing "Happy Birthday" to you on Air Force One, that's about the only way.
I may or may not have a picture with him, but that's
Yeah,
so, but
like
no,
yeah,
it was cool.
yeah, it's a long way from playing beach volleyball at Miramar. So
Hauling 18 chains up to the flight deck to go through the South China Sea before they blow the planes off the deck. Yeah, that's come a little further than that.
I went the
So
Top Gun route. I tried to mess with you on that with the volleyball, but yeah,
hey,
but
my barracks was right by that volleyball court from the movie. So I got there. I got to Miramar in 91, spring of 91. And so when you see the movie and they're playing, those buildings right next to it are actually enlisted buildings, for us. And so I was right there. So I was
so
can't
you
say
talk.
I don't remember if I played volleyball there or not, but I'm sure I did something there. But the Class 6 store was like the right next to that. So who knows?
Good point. You did something there. The Class 6 was right by. So that
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
for those that are watching, listening, probably can put those two and two together.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but so you talked about Secretary Collins. So one question we have in the chat is, what advice would you give Secretary Collins today if you could? Or maybe you already have. I don't know, but
I would not. I think one of the things that you learn. I mean, I have things I would say that I hope he does and that kind of stuff, or I'm sure he will. But I mean, there is, just like any other job, I think you have, especially if you've been in the military and you've kind of gone through the ranks, whether officer enlisted, it really doesn't matter. You always gain perspective of what you thought. Maybe, when I was an E3, and man, that E5, why did he do that? And why did he downgrade me? And then you get to that position, you're like, oh, now I understand that. So I don't think I'd ever presume to, like, oh, oh, Doug, you should do this, that. No, I mean, I understand now, just even in the short amount of time I got to do it, the pressure and the utmost responsibility. And frankly, I mean, I'm sure Pete Hegseth at the DoD is like, yeah, it's really cool to be the DoD secretary, and I'm sure other agencies, but at VA, it does feel differently. Not always good different, but it always feels different, because you really do have, I mean, there's lots of agencies with big missions and stuff like that, and like DoD, right? You have 2 million or so people out there that are depending on you every day to do your job. Well, at VA, you've got like 19 million that are, interested in what you're doing, either passively or actively, depending on whether they're in healthcare or getting benefits. And so it's a little more. There's a little more weight to it. So I would say, I mean, I really appreciate what he's done from a communication standpoint. And knowing some of his comms team there, and I have to give them a shout out. They're some of the best comms folks I've worked with. I've gotten a chance to work with them both in the VA and outside of it. So I know he's getting good support when it comes to him pushing back on media. Because that was something we had to fight every day. I mean, And it's one of those funny things, right? I mean, we all know Barrick's rumors. We've all been around like, oh, I've heard that and this, and Barrick's lawyers tell me this is the way, this is how you get your 100%, all this kind of stuff, right? We kind of intuitively know this, so we can appreciate it. Um, the media is worse than that, than for the most part, than anything else. And it's not that they're, I mean, I won't say they're bad people individually, but it's just so easy because you're dealing with so many different issues at VA. Most of them aren't great. I mean, you're talking about conditions that are horrible, statistics that are always horrible. Nothing, there's no like great stories about VA. It's always just how to help people through really tough situations.
Right.
And so the media will take advantage of that. So I'm really happy with the way that he's really just said, look, we're going to get the truth out there, or at least going to dismantle some of these arguments. But he's got a challenge, right? I mean, he's got to turn around an organization that's been resistant to what the American people have said it wants from its VA for a good solid decade now. I mean, ever since 2014. I mean, we talked about this earlier about the political influence on VA and how hard it is to do. I mean, we've had bill after, legislation after legislation, law after law get passed, pushing the VA toward having more access, more choice for veterans on how to get their health care, telling the VA it needs to change the way it does business. And it's been resistant to it. And I understand some of the arguments and I get it, but it's time now to make what the American people want, obviously what President Trump wants, really what other, presidents have wanted as well. And that's a VA that works for veterans first. And I know it's kind of cliched, but you know, think about what each individual veteran needs first, and then design whatever they need around that. And I've heard the arguments that, like, oh, well, you can't do that because you just can't do it. Well, no, no. If you're a for-profit healthcare system, you're absolutely right. You've got to create a suite of services and then have people come to it, and you want to mention, yeah. But when you're at the VA and we're spending another 20% this year, I mean, we're going to have a half a billion dollar, no, we're going to have a half a trillion dollar budget soon. There's no reason why. I mean, our population in the VA is small compared to most. I mean, we only have 19 million veterans, depending on how people count them. That's it. Like, that's the total population. We only serve about 8 million of those. This is where the numbers, and they always tell you not to talk about numbers, but I mean, there's only what 9.5 million people enrolled in VA healthcare. They're only seeing about, I mean, there's only about 7.5 or so million veterans, keeping all the numbers, but 7.5 million veterans that are actually getting some care at VA. And when you go to the veterans that actually get 100% of their VA care, I'm telling you that number is very small in comparison. So there's no reason why we can't provide, with the billions of dollars we spend, that we can provide what we need. Now it's going to be hard choices to make. I mean, we're going to have to figure out maybe different ways of delivering that care, maybe not through a main, VA hospital, maybe through through community care and others. And maybe some states that don't have large veteran populations don't have VA hospitals. But now, now you grab the political third rail because everybody wants to have a VA hospital in their state and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And I get it,
But that's the
but
politics, right? But the
that's the
people
politics.
people want just care. So if it means that they can go to a well now or an urgent care or a local hospital, right? The VA should be able to take care of that. And I would imagine if they broke down the cost of, I mean, you look, and I'm sure you just ran through the numbers, but if someone, and they have
Oh, yeah.
taken the cost of what the VA costs every year, divide that by the number of veterans that they even half serve, right? Maybe it's a 7.5, 8 million. The amount they're spending per veteran, again, you're spreading it across peanut butter style. I mean, you could let a person go to a local hospital chain and get care and just submit that bill to the VA, just like that hospital submits that bill to every major healthcare insurance provider, right? There's
Yeah,
no
when you start doing simple math on the VA budget in total, which isn't fair because that's, benefits and healthcare spend, all that stuff put
yeah,
together. But when you do that with the 19 million veterans, you're like, wait a second. I could write a check to every veteran for this amount. Well, wait a second. I don't worry about, I mean, that's interesting. What I look at is the actuarial tables for veterans, which in 2040, it's projected that we'll have about 12 and a half, 13 million veterans. Now, I mean, that's just because of those are just numbers, right? I mean, that's the unfortunately, a lot of veterans pass, that kind of stuff. And so I'm just looking forward going, are we still going to have are we still going to have a $500 billion budget for VA when we're serving, basically the population of inner city LA?
Well,
I don't know. I mean, I
nobody
don't know
ever
if we can do that.
it's like the guy say the government never, short of President Trump in the first administration, but the government never takes regulation away. All they do is keep adding regulation. The VA being a not for profit institution has no motivation to cut budgets and streamline, right? And
Yeah.
unless Congress says you're not getting it, you're serving, let veterans figure out how to make it happen. But then you get into the politics of people not wanting the VA hospital in their area that they represent to be shut down, and so on and so forth. I want to ask you real quick. Got a little bit time left. I want to ask a couple things. One is the community care. Veterans of my family, people that have taken part in that. That seems to be very successful. Has that continued to grow? I mean, because that has really helped get the wait times down, get care, especially care that's not acute care that's not necessarily need to get into a hospital or ER. Because if you can't get into your primary care, you just go sit in the basement at the VA and in the ER for hours and hours to see about something that's really minor. Is that community care
Yeah.
really off? Because it seems like it has to.
Yeah. It's, I mean, so community care is never going to go away in its current form because it is in statute at this point, right? That was the process that started in 2014, established in 2018. I mean, there's some bills on the Hill right now that would push that even further onto the choice side, because now, as you know, I mean, you need to go in and get a referral and kind of work through the VA, and they have some control over that still needs to be worked out. It's, I would encourage everybody to, if you want to get smart on something, get smart on community care eligibility rules and what the VA is supposed to do. So if you hear something different from your local VA, push back, because they will probably fold really quickly. But that's I think now is the point where people are trying to decide, what do we do for that long-term solution for veterans? And I the VA can do some really great things, and I've been to some VA hospitals that are the potential is amazing. But like you said, I mean, without competition or motivation, accountability, whatever we want to describe that, it's tough, right? Because you're just in your own bubble. You measure yourself, and if you decide today I did a great job, well, I did it. I guess I did a great job, and you're not comparing yourself to the hospital down the street that saw 15 times more patients than you did from a volume perspective, which means more people got care. You're still sitting with a wait list or a backlog of people who want care, and yet you're saying, well, we did good today, we feel good about ourselves. I don't want to try to make people feel bad about themselves, but what I do want them to feel is motivated to see it, to truly serve all veterans, not just the veterans that are lucky enough to make it through the door and get an appointment. um, I think the only way for that to happen is going to be a competitive environment between community care and our VA hospitals, to encourage them to get better, or at least maybe even get specialized in things that they do really do well, and we
Right.
start just pushing regular stuff out to the community. But I'll tell you, the thing that I work on now and I'm more interested in is, I think we can be so much smarter on the VA side. I mean, if you had private insurance right now, you do, and those veterans that do have private insurance, you probably notice your insurance company saying, "Hey, we notice you have a back issue. We'd love for you to, go get some, chiropractic, or do some other things." And it's like, "Oh, wow, that's really great. Blue Cross called and they want me to take care of myself," and that's nice of them. No, it's actually very cynical, because they don't want to pay for that 50, $60,000 surgery in 5 years that they know you're going to need, because now with the tools that they have and population health and predictive healthcare, they can tell you, oh, based on your current condition, here's all the stuff that's most likely going to happen to you. So really, all they're trying to do is defer cost or
Right.
push cost off as far as possible. Now, that seems cynical, but really it's, let me give you a better quality of life, because that's the only way I'm going to push off these kind of things that are there. I mean, we've got a huge opportunity with the amount of data we have with veterans, the amount of, let's say, control, but the amount of interaction that we can have with this population. We could be the gold standard. I mean, veterans could get the absolute best in population care, or population health care management, where
Preventative.
we're in preventative care. Absolutely, that's a better word. And I just see it like I think we're just missing the opportunity because it's right there for us to take. The tools are getting better and better. When we get this new health record online, I mean, we'll have every capability that we need to have. And I just frankly just don't want to miss the opportunity. Because we could set the standard again for everybody else, but it also I think pulls in folks that I mean, because the VA has a trust. I won't say a trust issue, but it's just like, look, I don't want to deal with it. It's too hard. I mean, I had never been to a VA hospital, and I had never done a disability claim before I actually worked at the VA. Actually, I didn't even do it till afterwards because it was just I had heard from other people. It's like, don't even bother. I feel fine. I don't need to go to the VA. Don't even mess with it. And when I was growing up in Tennessee, Memphis, there was having a whole bunch of issues in Memphis's back 80s VAs, and that was a place. I mean, that was the you went there and you died. Like
Right.
you could go in healthy and you died there. Like
Well,
it was
the
some weird
the
stories.
running joke is always, what do you call a doctor graduates bottom of the class? People say doctor, we're like, no, VA doctor, right? I mean, it was just, there was always a running joke that's they were not the ones that were the top of the class. But I want to go back to something you mentioned real quick about the predictive stuff. It's funny you mentioned I have a
Mhm,
good who actually has built a company and stuff, but using AI is
mhm,
working with clinics and stuff like that. And he has built a system and a service that he sells to doctors' offices and insurance companies that does that. And they import, they get the patient records, all that stuff signed off. It imports it. The AI engine runs and spits
mhm.
out, tells the patient, tells the doctor, and tells the patient exactly what all of their records are, all their lab work, and can predict to them what they're probably going to face in the next couple of years, months, whatever, in a very human readable, non-doctory kind of language. So it's out there, and when you think
Yeah,
about
and when you think about it, you look at. I mean, I just had I got a note about a brother that took his life in the last 48 hours, and he was dealing with chronic pain every day, surgery every year, all that kind of stuff. He was just living with these issues. Now, maybe this doesn't solve it for him, but I'm like with all those folks and all these kind of issues, if we really wanted to try to solve those, we can't. We can't. I mean, the technology's there's those kind of stuff. It's. I mean, I don't want to besmirch anybody's motivation or any of those kind of things, but it's we can do better, and there's getting to be very little excuses for us not to. Um,
let me ask you this real quick. This is something that's been on my mind working around the VA that I have with a lot of different aspects. And I kind of sat back and looked at it from the education benefits, healthcare benefit, all the benefits that the VA provides. And I just kind of had this epiphany, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe they're out there and I don't know, but I haven't seen that the VA assigns a case manager to a patient, and I feel like that's where we're missing it. And I say that for this, let me give this scenario, right? A young soldier, young veteran, they're going through stuff, they're maybe they filed a disability claim, they've got some percentage of disability, they're getting VA health care, but they also don't know what's happening on the education side, and they don't know that these benefits are available in this, because there's not a case manager like there are in the civilian world that is looking out for that patient, if you would, or the veterans who's enrolled in the VAs, everything that they need to know that the VA provides. And I know this because working with a state veterans claim officer who used to be one of my soldiers who now does that, talking to him about certain new education benefits, he's like, I have no visibility into that. This dude works disability claims and disability claims only and does a great job at it. But I'm telling him about other stuff, and he's like, I have no visibility into that. And that's when I started thinking, is that what we're missing? Should that be what the VA has, or do they have it? And it's only at a certain level.
well, now is the controversial part of the show because, as you can see with the poster behind me, so about 2 years ago, I started getting involved in the private sector benefits side of things. Mainly because I was kind of wanting to see what was it really about, that kind of stuff, because I'd heard about, and even in the VA, you hear about these folks like, oh, we'll get you your disability claims and we'll do this kind of stuff and we'll help you with that and the other. And if you don't go through it, you always have that little bit of like, well, what are you trying to do? And I knew folks like, yeah, just pay me some money, I'll take care of it for you. I wanted to see, is it for real? Is there some legitimacy here? Is it just a bunch of bad guys? What is going on? And I just kind of went in head first into this whole industry and started realizing that you're right. There isn't really, the VA does have more of a we have all this stuff, you figure it out.
Yep.
And that's kind of it is. And then we've got veteran service organizations. And I'll just say it. I mean, honestly, now I don't know where the VA starts and the or ends and the veteran service organizations begin. They all seem to be kind of
And
part of the same group. And it's not that I bump heads with VSOs a lot right now, but it's not that I don't like them. I'm just like, guys, can we just focus on what's best for veterans? Because we all have a piece of this, and we could solve it, but we all want to have policy fights, and we all want to be more influential in the V. I didn't understand that part of it. And then I talked to a lot of state secretaries of Veterans Affairs at the state level, or commissioners, depending on how their state's set up. Veteran service officers at the state level, at the county level, incredibly dedicated folks. I mean, but they only know what they know, and so they're kind of on the same journey of like, well, I'm gonna go try to figure all this VA stuff out, and they're gonna wake up one day at about 70, realize that they've got this huge annotated disability, or claims book that they've worked with, and they're still not current, and they're done. Like, they got to retire at some point. There's got to be a better way to do that. I think there's some great private sector options for that, as long as we have some good guardrails around that. The VA needs the help, and I just don't see the VA as being. I mean, think about it. I mean, I went through TAPS twice. I couldn't tell you that it ever had any impact on me at all, in a positive way or a negative way.
right.
Frankly, it just was irrelevant.
And,
And I think that's not uncommon for
oh,
most folks.
yeah, it depends on who you got and that kind of stuff, which goes to the VA, right? I know some people that, look, I'm in the Buffalo, New York area, right? Our last year, the head of the VA here and his chief of staff were both fired, and
Mm.
which was under the Biden administration, but that tells you how bad it was.
Yep.
And there's other ones, and it's not been known to do good care, but there's others, especially those in Florida, that I have buddies of mine, mutual friends of ours, that swear by it, that have saved their
Yep.
lives, and they
Yeah.
do. And there's definitely not a standard. There's a variance across major not even talking about clinics, but major hospitals.
The VA has some of the best prostate cancer um, centers of excellence in the country. And you'd never know it unless you lived in Dallas or Seattle or a couple other places. You just don't know. But they're there. I mean, you have these little pockets of great stuff, but
Maybe that's where President Biden should have went. Maybe they would have caught his 9 years earlier than they claimed.
I
And I
hey,
you
we're
open
all going to struggle with that at some point. So like, I don't wish ill on on
no,
that one, but yeah,
yeah, but it was just
you're right though.
I just look at, there's patients, again, friends of mine that do this, that actually watch the show, but there are, young patients, children that have multiple ailments and stuff, and they go to these centers, private centers, or
Mhm.
funded different things, and they have a case manager that knows everything about their care, everything about what they have going on or whatever. In my where I work in the software industry, it's very common that we have what we call customer success managers, which are there's
Mhm.
so many customers. They just make sure that they know about the latest, stuff coming out and what's happening, and if they have any support tickets open, that they're handled. So I take that and transition out into this. It's like you said, of all
Well,
19 veterans, 7.5 maybe kind of full time. So
yeah.
the ones that are in there, that 4.5 or 5 million up to 8 million that are going all the time, should probably have a dedicated case manager
Mhm.
per. uh Hold on a
Well, if
second.
you
I think
think about it, right? If the VA just focused on the success of a veteran, their health, their success, their being healthy, economic success, all the things that we have programs for, all the things that we spend money on. If we actually were concerned about the outcomes for that veteran, and that's how we measured ourselves. You're right. The VA would be structured very differently, because right now the VA is structured as a corporate entity, right? We have a veterans experience office, we have customer relations office, customer relationship offices, those kind of things. But those are all inward organizing functions that can be almost disconnected from an outcome. They will tie them to their own outcomes, to the organization's outcomes, but those outcome measures are not necessarily tied to, and in many cases aren't, to a veteran's outcome. And so when a veteran goes bankrupt, who's responsible for that? well, obviously the veteran is, but was there anything that we could do to help them
Right.
have not gotten into that situation? That's kind of an extreme thing. But if a veteran, I mean, suicide's a
Well,
straightforward one, but there's other situations where we're not, we're spending a lot of money on a lot of programs, but where's the success mechanism? And all these veterans that are really successful, you ask them how they got there. I don't know if the VA is ever going to get mentioned in that, that thank you speech for them.
Well, every
Um,
major hospital has a patient advocacy office, which
mhm.
is usually only staffed by a couple people whose sole job is for the veteran to go to say, I don't feel like I'm getting good care. Can I, I feel like I'm not being treated well or whatever. Most have been retired first star, and a lot of soldiers serving under me, a lot of them going through VA. Most of them never know that office exists. They just suffer through a crappy doctor, a bad experience, or whatever, and they don't even, and sometimes they come to me or my wife and be like, did you know about this? Here's their number, here's their email, get a hold of their job is to help. They're like an IG kind of, right? But for the patient, for the veteran to get on the healthcare side better. And most don't even know that exists, that there's this office, but it's also barely staffed. That should be an
Yeah,
army there, right? That's kind of your case
it's good.
manager, you
Yeah,
know?
and it should be networked in a way where it's not just that one hospital. It should be across the VISN, across the system, and then it also should have connections to, because as we know, when we go to help a veteran that's in crisis, it's not just the healthcare piece, it's the benefits piece, it's the other types of wraparound services that they need that we're trying to put all together that come from all different kinds of places. And you just have to, know, I get calls like this all the time. Can you help us with this? And you're right. You start making connections with all these different strings that can help them. You kind of wish sometimes it was a little easier than that. And that's why I like some of these options that I've seen where, to be successful in helping a veteran, if you're a private sector entity, you have to do a good job. Like you can't just say, well, I did my best, be happy with what you got. Like you have to do good, do a job or you don't stay in business. And that mentality, I know is very difficult to do on the government side, if not impossible, which is kind of what's led me to, well, maybe more of this should be private, because there's a built-in incentive on that side where I've struggled to find the incentive. Just saying, oh, I want to serve veterans and I've got a heart for veterans. I, I guess the cynical part of me, or the part that I've learned, unfortunately, is that that's just not good enough. I mean,
Well,
it doesn't do it.
and I don't want to crap all over VA and stuff, but I mean, there are definitely a lot of people working in the VAs that have a good heart. A lot of them are veterans.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
so I know quite a few locally that work there that I've served with, and they're really trying to do the right thing. But like with all organizations, the bad apples and all that stuff, there are other people that are there because that's the job they got, and this and that, or they think it's stable because it's for the government,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah. I
and
will
they
tell
just
you, this is not a people problem. The,
right,
the the VA does not have a people problem, whether it's the number of people or whatever. It's not that. It is a structure. It's the environments and the structures you're putting those people into that they can do their best and never really fulfill their potential or get the job done. And there's always going to be people that just are lazy or whatever else. Sure, I got that, but half the time you're not able to differentiate between the two.
yeah,
And that's where and that's back to the accountability piece. That's the part that always frustrated me, because I would see people really trying to make a difference get really frustrated because they're sitting next to somebody else that just doesn't bother. They don't care. And they're like, why I'm working my ass off and this person's getting promoted the same time I do. It's same kind of military thing sometimes, but it's like, why am I even working here? And so
right.
you lose really good people that are dedicated because they just like, it's what's the point? You put me in a no-win situation.
We see that with law enforcement, all the people where they
Mhm.
go, my management, my leadership doesn't have my back. Why am I out here risking myself, or well, like I say, working hard, doing
Sure.
whatever? And Joe Blow or Susie Blow next to me doesn't, and they get paid the same, and they get to go home every day at 3, and they sleep well at night. And I'm stressing because I felt I didn't do 110%. Right. So, hey, we've been going for a while, man. We could keep going for sure. I had so many more
Oh yeah.
topics, but
Hey, but we can talk. I mean, VA is one of those things you can talk about forever, and yeah, happy to talk about that. Or if we ever want to get into the disability claims stuff, that's really what I've been dedicating the last couple of years to with the National Association for Veteran Rights. Really
yeah,
started that just to help the private sector folks really do the right thing by veterans and hold them accountable. And so I've been working across about 30, almost 40 states over the last year and a half, whether on the legislative side and things like that. So there's all kinds of other stuff we can jump into. Happy to do that anytime.
Yeah, let's definitely we'll make sure we get you back on for sure, because I want to talk about NAVR. I want to talk about a couple of things in this stuff. But anything, Peter, before we
You got to talk about dogs too.
uh,
My buddy over in Clarksville that rescues pointy ear dogs for veterans. He's got a great little thing there. So
yeah, we've Rob's on, of course, in the background. Rob, we've already lined up 2-3 more shows now with Peter. We got
there you go. All right.
hey,
Well, it's great, Stu. Appreciate it.
yeah, before we let you go, and definitely stay on for after we close out, stay on, because I want to chat with you for
Sure.
a second. Before we let you go, anything for our listeners and viewers that we didn't cover on the topics we talked about, you want to make sure you get out there, or anything that you're working on that you want to let people know about that we just weren't able to get to?
I mean, the plea for folks. I mean, when you find somebody that a fellow veteran in crisis, you know, just reach out and try to network them into a local charity that or group that can help them. Just connect with them. Some of these problems are bigger than just one group or one person to deal with, but getting them started. I had an experience with a guy down in Florida. Got connected him through a friend, and it was just like, "Hey, can you talk to this guy?" And that's all he needed. Like literally, I mean, he had a multi SF and the agency type stuff. I mean, I'm talking to this guy going like, "Gee whiz, man, you've worked with everybody, all this stuff," and he just slipped through the cracks, and he just wanted to reconnect, and we just got him reconnected. I mean, he was giving his stuff away, doing all this kind of stuff, but he just got plugged back in, and that's all he needed. He just snapped right out of it. So you never know what might work, but always just kind of jump in. I kind of limit now my nonprofit work just so I can dedicate time to stuff without spreading yourself too thin. But I try to just always pick up the call when folks have can you help this guy? I mean, I may not be able to do much, but just connect him with somebody else and get them there. So I would just encourage folks to just keep that part of it and keep it local. Don't get frustrated with, oh, the VA did. The VA is not going to solve any of these problems anyway. Just find somebody local that can work with folks. That's where most of these solutions come from. They'll eventually, the bigger groups can get involved, but at the starting point, a lot of times I find folks just need to know there's people in their community that's there for them. So
Yeah,
I
all
encourage
about
that. And
it's all about networking and having friends in low
yeah,
places, like Mr.
oh
Wolf,
yeah, yeah,
who has helped
absolutely.
me, who has helped me a number of times from getting a
Oh,
dead
I get plenty of calls from Wolf. I
yeah,
get plenty of calls. Hey,
yeah.
can you help this guy? I'm like, okay, give me some more information. How do we get this going? So,
He may have
but
called you for me a couple of times. We reached out
mhm.
to help family members and help
Yep.
people and like
Yeah,
that.
that's the it's not the fun. It's hard to call that fun, but that is the motivating part of
Rewarding.
having
It's rewarding.
been this. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, sometimes you don't know how the resolution ever goes because they come fast, but you get to put in, you get to contribute a little bit, and that keeps you going through the day. So
absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much, Peter, for your time tonight. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure you check out our sponsors, and we've been running them along the bottom. We will talk to you all next week. Stay tuned here on Stu and the Nun. Be sure and tune in on Tuesday nights for our Lima Charlie show. As you've been seeing, we've had some great guests on there. And with all that, Peter, thank you again, sir. Great to see you again, bud.
thanks, appreciate it.